Hello and welcome to the Fortnite On podcast, the show about the lore and universe of the Halo franchise. This is episode number 50. I'm David, and I'm joined by my usual co-host, Dani.
Totally.
And our guest this week
Hello.
is DayAndKnightly. You are a first-time guest on the show, so why don't you introduce yourself, a little about yourself, and your background in Halo.
First of all, thanks a lot for having me on. It's fantastic. Just a chance to dive into Halo this way again. It has been awesome. So, history with Halo. I mean, we just had the 21st anniversary of Combat Evolved coming out. So I had, back in those glory days, LAN parties, friends, family, kind of being able to do that and experience Halo that way, and something that really drew me in and made me stick around even more was the fact that there was this lore. There was Shooty, and there was all this story just surrounding all of it and rising it up and supporting it. And so I really appreciated that, and I loved diving into that. And then even, as time has gone on and all the different story paths and beats and everything from the Halo community modcast, back in the day, I was looking at notes that I took from that. It's been like, I think 10 years ago, more around Halo 4 time. So, that's kind of how I got here. It's just been something that there's always something to find and enjoy, agree or disagree with, and I'm glad it's still going. And again, I'm really thankful to be here.
All right, yeah, and we've brought you on to talk about belatedly Halo: The Rubicon Protocol. Came out. Was originally supposed to come out in March of this year, and it got delayed twice. To June, and then finally released in August. Feels very much like other gay novels in that it's not quite a total companion to the game, like Halo the Flood, in this case Halo Infinite, but it is also very much tying into stuff we see, fleshing out the characters that are really mostly just in audio logs and stuff in the game, and giving us a little more about it, kind of go through it blow by blow. But I guess first, what were everyone's thoughts?
I'm the guest. I'd like to hear what you guys think first. But I can go, no problem. Yeah, I mean, overall, trying to think of a more nuanced or clever way to say it, but overall, I liked it. That's my hard-hitting insight. I liked it. I did really something that kept coming up for me that I know other people have gone through is just seeing the Spartans differently. I mean, this wasn't like an official focus of the book. I mean, the focus of the book is like you mentioned, to tell that kind of, almost but not quite companion story, and just add a lot more detail and kind of, just another story, before you play as Chief, but really seeing, how a Spartan 4 acts with other people when they're separated from their squad, when they're, interacting with the public, be it civilian or other military personnel. So that was something that really jumped out to me that I wasn't looking for, but there are a couple of reasons. I mean, it could be because having already played Halo Infinite and seeing this world and say the Halo from Chief's point of view. I mean, that's obviously fresh, and that's how I'm usually thinking about things anyway. So to have these other sort of lone Spartans, but not alone, with other people, and just their emotions and how they interacted, and how that was so different than a book with Blue Team, obviously, or with Chief planning on and going on the next high stakes mission. So I really appreciated that angle of it, and was something that I wasn't looking for, and also surprised me because clearly I think I know how Chief thinks, because as I was going along, I was thinking, well, he wouldn't, I don't know if he'd say that, or I don't know if he'd show this emotion, or, he wouldn't, treat someone, uh, this way. And it was just, so that was something I wasn't looking for, but I thought it was really interesting, and I really liked, going through it and thinking about things for the podcast. So I really liked how that went. As far as the story overall, yeah, the key word liked. I wasn't blown away, and I don't think you can be, because the main story with the game I thought was done really well, and this adds to that, but I certainly think it doesn't overshadow it. And those are my initial thoughts.
Well, I think that the book is a great companion to Halo Infinite, obviously. But I think the book tends to emphasize, or at least demonstrate amply, the hollow nature of Infinite's story, that the book feels more fleshed out than the game does. And despite being a more wholesome piece of content than the game, I think it was a very limited experience, because it was held back by a lot of the game's narrative choices, or should I say lack of narrative choices. So it doesn't really have much room to go, really. It doesn't really go anywhere, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you brought up, Day, that I hadn't really considered. Aside from, I guess, Hunters in the Dark, we don't get a lot of interior thoughts about Spartan Force. Like, we got them in stuff like Spartan Ops and Escalation, which I don't think are particularly, aside from like maybe Thorn's story in Escalation, they're not really interior focused, and don't really give you a good look into the characters. So this is actually one of the few really deep dives into that. And yeah, like Dani said, in the game, it's sad coming across the dead Spartans, but aside from giving you a character moment with Chief, there's not a lot there. And this actually backfills in stuff that you kind of wish more was in there. I definitely think something I brought up in our Infinite review is, I think one of the weaker parts of Infinite was its side stories, that compared to a game like Bioshock, the data pads and the supplemental stuff you found didn't always do a great job of feeling natural, organic, or telling a story through the environment. And so this was kind of a necessary addition to really make some of those stories pop a bit more. And yeah, it's I think it holds up on its own without Infinite, but at the same time, it just sort of ends, which I guess we'll get into later when we go through blow by blow. But I was kind of surprised when I was reading it right before this podcast recording. I'm like, wait, that's it? Like, I thought I would have more to read. So it's like, nope, we're just gonna end here.
To be fair, it does a good job of mirroring the game that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it kind of feels like we're like missing one last bit to push.
Oh, by the way, as well, not to point out spoilers or anything, but if you played Halo Infinite and you had questions about a lot of the stuff going on, this book does not answer many, or not many of those questions at all, which I find quite disappointing. Like, I was hoping this book would backfill it a bit more than what it does. So my expectations is, I don't think it didn't hit what I wanted it to hit, and it's not the fault of the author. It's not the fault of the quality of writing. I think it's one of those higher up sort of overall decision bullshit that just gets in the way and interferes with what could have been.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, unfortunately, this is Kelly Gay's weakest novel, which is not like damning with faint praise. It's still good, but just with the scaffolding compared to where she was able to go with her original characters, it felt a little more straight. I was actually
really hoping to get more of the explanation and of just why and how the Infinity was destroyed, possibly, or how they got there, or why they were there. I mean, we got sort of, things are bad and people are falling out of the sky, and but found myself right off the bat. I mean, that was something I was kind of looking forward to. I thought, oh yeah, I mean, they didn't have time or room or for whatever reason to put that in the game, but I'm sure we'll have this. Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, they did. I mean, they did start with everything going crazy on Infinity, but I wanted to know a little bit more about how that happened, because I mean that ship has been I mean, I don't know if you I mean the centerpiece for the last couple games. I mean, I was staring at it for hours and hours, and different game menus, and it's always kind of been the center, and I think even in some ways like representative of the last couple games, and it was just like, yep, this is done. I mean, even having I'm trying to remember the cutscene specifically, but even did they have one of the banished ships actually ram into it, kind of reminiscent of how the Infinity had done so at the beginning of whenever Spartan Ops started. I'm not sure. Yeah. So I was just like, like that. It was like
I feel that the respect shown to that area of your interest to the Infinity, I think they've shown the same sort of respect to the Infinity that they showed to Requiem by chucking it in the sun. You know what I mean? They're embarrassed by it. It's clearly they're embarrassed by it, and they just want to get it out of the way. And it's a damn shame that 343 can't get their damn act together and actually treat their own material with any sort of amount of respect, because it doesn't matter what you're reading right now. A couple of books later, it's going to be up someone's ass. It's going to be gone. It's not going to be relevant. It's gone. It's like there's no real permanence in a long-running franchise that bases the whole thing on a consistent, ongoing lore. Whenever it just chucks everything out every couple of years, essentially, it just does not matter. Your characters doesn't matter. Your situations, your settings, none of it seems to ultimately matter over the long term. And it's ultimately disrespectful to anyone who wastes their time getting to know this stuff.
I don't think it's chucked into the sun. I think between this and the book, they're still trying to just hedge their bets instead of giving definitive answers to some stuff. And sometimes it's good to tease things. Sometimes you can't.
5-6 years, then yeah, you may as well hedge your bets. It's not like we're sitting here waiting for it. Oh wait, we have been, and we get here, and this is what we get. It's downright insulting. If you give it, and we all do, we're here because we do. And this is what we get. This is the companion to the half-baked game. It's like, come on.
Yeah, it expands on some stuff that I think lots of people did want to see. It doesn't expand on other stuff that people really wanted to see. Yeah. So we'll kind of go starting from the beginning. As you say, it starts with everything going to hell. It doesn't spend much time on the Infinity. We're going to follow a bunch of Spartans here. It starts with Spartan Stone. I do like... everyone has their personal AIs throughout this, which ties into the multiplayer, but also is just it's nice to have, especially since oftentimes they are just off on their own. You get someone to bounce off of. I did laugh that Stone gets off Infinity with Murphy, who I guess is kind of like the main secondary character, with a dropship pilot, and I noted they mentioned that he's got a drawl, so I wrote in my notes that he's marked to death. No person with a drawl is surviving this. And yeah, we get thrown a bunch of different people. There's like you're saying, so there's Spartan Stone, Fire Team Shadow, Spartan Kovan. We get a little bit more with Fire Team Taurus, who's Spartan Griffin, who we end up meeting ever so briefly in Infinite. We do get, in terms of little, I think Gay is pretty good about putting little tiny things linking to other stuff without having it feel like she's trying to push them. But they mention Anvil Station from Halo Online. Like that was actually a thing, even if it got canceled.
It's nice. It's nice to know that people still care, and they know that folks still care, and we'll throw in little references like that.
Yeah. I did kind of appreciate that the entire evacuation sequence feels like what the evacuation in Halo 1 should have been off the Autumn, but they don't really spend much. Dietz doesn't spend much time with it, and you don't really spend much time in it in Halo CE either. So it's kind of nice to have that feeling of everything's going to hell, and they're like, all right, we got to go now, etc. And so everyone heads down to the surface. I wrote down that Stone does not kill her lifeboat upon landing, so better than Master Chief right there.
That was the first big twist of the story. What? Like, I think she said something like, "Everybody good?" And they're like, "Yeah, a couple bruises were fine." It's like, oh, wow, what's gonna happen next?
Okay. Yeah, and the opening chapters I think are pretty successful in setting up a sense of like the cacophony of war, and that no one knows what the hell's going on, and it's sort of for some large sections of this book, some characters are just cut off and don't know what's going on, kind of mirroring the same thing we get in Infinite. I think that was successful of selling the mood they're trying to get going on. We also do get some, like, again, there's a few things that sort of, even if they don't definitively answer, kind of tie into stuff that people were wondering about Infinite. Like they mentioned, there's 7,000 people on board Infinity, which is super low for a crew complement, which kind of ties into possibly how it was so easily taken. We do get a cool little action sequence. Coven drops in a drop pod, and they lands inside a Phantom to take out everyone there. And they link up with Fireteam Taurus and take out AA guns to clear the way for evac. And we get an introduction to our regular guys, and that's something I also do appreciate with this book, and Kelly's material in general, is that she spends time with the not heroes. So like there's Eric Bender the barber on the ship, and then the mortician, Gavin Joe, and these are kind of your regular characters who inexplicably survive until the end, whereas throughout this book there will be the introduction of many Marines and ODSTs who get slaughtered immediately after they're introduced. It's really a story of the Spartans and just like the kind of the civilian contractors on Infinity, and it's another different.
It was something where,
which I appreciate.
Reading it and then kind of going back through it and just jot down some notes. I had to remind myself who they were, just because they, like have everything from the, the barber, detail to, one of the characters possibly liked one of the other ones. It was just a throwaway line, but it was mentioned. I mean, I'm used to, at least in my brain, I'm used to seeing them as kind of, UNSC, NPC, yes, they have a name. Yes, there's some sort of backstory, but, here's the tough one, or here's the scared one, or, here's the one that, just happens to know key point of information, like whatever they may be. But, when it comes down to it, this is a Spartan story. And in this case, that was not the case. So yeah, I like that as well. I thought it was interesting, but I felt like I kind of have my mind, programmed automatically to sort of tune them out when, okay, we're all together, right? So it just it makes for different dynamics for sure.
And like how I was writing at the beginning, like, oh, that guy's going to die. Like you just kind of assume, oh, this is we get a brief moment with them and they're probably all going to die immediately. And then it's going to focus on these other characters. And it actually doesn't, which is a nice throw. And so everyone's going down the surface. We meet the other, I guess, main character, who's a medic, Lucas Browning. He's in Murphy's pod. And they survive, but they're trapped inside with a couple dead people and one people dying, which sounds like hell on earth. Like, ooh, that would not be fun. And Browning is one of the characters who we also get details from the Halo Infinite intel, but he's basically just crazy in those, so it's nice to give him an actual character before he goes crazy. And they make content with another Spartan 4, Horvath. And yeah, I just really like that this entire time they're introducing the Spartans, who are obviously doing all the cool stuff, but they spend so much time with the non-combat crew. I think at one point I don't think they end up surviving long, but there's a fire safety specialist as one of them. Like just really kind of random. Like, of course, a ship with thousands of people has these roles.
There's one point I forgot actually when we were mentioning the AIs. Why why do all the Spartans have AIs off the back of the created scenario?
They're just the dumb ones, though, so it's okay. It is kind of funny as much as I enjoy them as a gameplay element and for customization and Infinite. It's like, oh, it's
The
okay. They're
willingness to
they're the
trust
dumb ones.
AI,
It's fine.
yeah, it is a bit silly, because you think the reactions to that, the reactions to the whole scenario of the creator taking over the fucking place and the damage that it done to everything, they would have been a bit more cautious, maybe.
Yeah, they put a little too much trust in their spider programs or whatever. Yeah, so we get they switch around perspectives throughout. We get a time set to Horvath's POV with his fire team, and they're just doing like a regular damage and sabotage as they're moving. Horvath reaches the pod. I like there's a fun little social detail. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like the stuff we get in. There's a nice short story in the comic Tales from Slip Space, where they have the Spartan 4 poker nights. Here we get a little detail that they have a cursing leaderboard. So every time they have a couple times when Horvath just starts swearing, but he's like, "It's okay. I'm way low on the leaderboard. I can lose them." And we get some background on Horvath, that he's from Alluvion, of course, a planet that got glassed. They have a nice back and forth with, I think, Murphy about where they're from. They're like talking about stuff. They mentioned regional accents, which so rarely comes up in sci-fi. It's a nice little touch. And that he was career military and he would have washed out because he had like some serious back injury, except the Spartan program started rehabilitating him. And then the ring starts falling apart and we get stuff that was also a little bit in the supplemental logs and stuff in Halo Infinite, but it's the moment when Cortana breaks everything apart. And again, it's like this, they spend a lot of time just talking about how that throws everything off and it's so confusing. It really, Kelly Gay does a really good job of like settling like how no one knows what the heck's going on in these early chapters. The pod occupants actually end up being saved by Spartan Stone instead. And then that's sort of the end of the first section. There's a couple time jumps throughout. It takes us from like basically day one to, I think the last one's like day 150 something or 160. So it takes us a fair amount of the way to Halo Infinite in terms of time frames. And so in terms of things that get better explained that you kind of had to infer, they do clarify that the Halo jumps to slip space, like kind of emergency a la Nightfall, which is not the media link. I think, hey, remember that really bad live action thing? But it comes in here. I think that sort of explains my theory. We will see how it all works out. I'm pretty sure Infinity is not destroyed and that it's just not a factor in Infinite because it might have physically been left wherever the fight was, is my thought. But we will see, unless there's some like wreckage or whatever. But they specifically mention like everyone's looking for it, and they never see it crash or anything like that. So I think it's out there. I know you are think it's gone, Danny, but I'm pretty sure it's
well. The absence screams all by itself. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter where it is. You know what I mean? If it's not there, it's not there.
But it also just highlights that everyone's on their own at this point. They have Horvath is like stuck on one chunk of the ring. His fire team gets wiped out. And yeah, that's the example of, again, they have surprised me because it's the Spartans who get kind of wiped out like nameless mooks, as opposed to just the Marines.
I was going to mention real quick about the Infinity, or even I think of Palmer, Lasky are mentioned, and whether like however anybody feels about if you want to see those characters or not, like because we're following the different groups and everyone's separated throughout the book, everyone's asking about the same questions we're asking, not every page, but just throughout the timeline of the book, like, oh, what I've been out of range, what's happening with the Infinity, what's happening with Lasky, did he make it? And then and then another character is reunited and they ask the same thing. So even the like even the characters want to know what the heck is going on, but it's just sort of yeah, it's
Still
left
left
out there.
open. Yeah. It comes up later, but it's kind of a weird note, I guess we'll get to, but they're like oddly cagey about one character's identification. And if you play the game, like, all right, this is clearly Spartan Griffin who we meet in the tower, but the fact that they don't talk about it for a while made me think, is it supposed to be Lasky or someone like that? And I was glad to see when I was looking up the discussion for it, other people were like, yeah, is he just trying to like not make the kid freak out because it would be a morale boost? But yeah, they leave the character, they hang a lantern on it because the characters are wondering the same things as we are, even as there are not answers. And Horvath gets spotted by a phantom, and he attempts to evade it, and their attempts to kill him piss off a sentinel. They have this really cool sequence where a Horvath ends up buried, and then basically the little chunk of the ring they're on is upside down with a failing containment field. So he's left with this this situation. They briefly have a enemy mine detour for a different genre, where after spending all his time trying to figure out his way off this little piece of the ring, he has to ally with a trapped brute to get out of there, because he needs him to dig out the piece of the sentinel, and then they're going to ride it out of there. And of course, they're going to immediately betray each other, which adds a nice little touch. The Banished don't just end up being obstacles, even though it's very much mostly from the humans' point of view throughout. And meanwhile, the lifeboat crew ends up linking up with Kovan and their crew. They take serious losses. They mention shrouds, so Halo Wars 2 gets some representation. They have their characterization section, which is where I wrote that like I cannot keep track of who everyone is. It gets better as it goes, but it also the scene does end with a guy getting nailed to a tree with a battle axe, which is novel. It's like, okay, that's a different look. Like again, they surprise you by killing off all the Marines and ODSTs, and so they're like, all right, we're gonna head to the Mortal Reverie, and if you've played Halo Infinite, it's a dun because nothing good happens from that, which is an interesting thing. Also, I guess my expectation was that there was going to be a lot more, I guess, treating this content sort of like Star Wars Rogue One, where everyone was going to bite it in the end. And that it was sort of going to be like Reach. It was going to be a like March to Doom, and it actually doesn't do that, even though there are some similarities.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That was my expectations heading into it. I did kind of expect a bloodbath. You know what I mean? I wasn't expecting many people to make it out. And to be fair, there's a lot of bloodbathing.
Much bloodbathing, but less bloodbathing than you thought. And that's actually another point, is that this has plenty of action scenes, but also Gay is totally happy just literally skipping to it. Like later on they have a battle and they cut to, and then a day and a half later, or a couple engagements, they just mention, and it's fine because there's still plenty of action scenes in here. But it's interesting that it's very much not the focus of this. It's about the characters and their emotions.
Partially it has to do with my lack of imagination, but because we're dealing with more regular folks and how they're trying to survive and interacting in this battle or later ones, I feel like I was able to follow better kind of every moment of what's happening. It was just easy for me to picture because obviously I could relate to it more rather than a Spartan jumping 30 feet in the air and twisting and hitting this just right at the sniper shot. Like, it's not that I can't follow that. It was, again, just another reminder to me of seeing it kind of from that different angle and how everything sort of interacts that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so everyone ends up at the Mortal Reverie. Happy to have a place to call home and rest. I think my favorite part of this entire novel is how Murphy gets emotional, like Verklempt over 2 slices of cheese pizza, which, I mean, I get. I can understand being emotional about the pizza. We also get a mention, again, if you wanted to remember Nightfall, there's a mention of like cedron fruit. I'm like, hey, that's a planet that existed. And yeah, so Horvath, he notices that there's like inside the Phantom were like these stones with ancient non-Forerunner glyphs or whatever. So of course the Banished are looking for something, and the Brute he frees is named Gorian. We get some camping scenes, which are also fun. I did also like that Gorian has clearly watched YouTube for the Halo Wars 2 cinematics, because he brings up like that Atriox crushed a Spartan's helmet this one time. And yeah, there's the inevitable betrayal after they manage to get it.
I was hoping
ring.
for an extended buddy comedy with these guys. You know, I was really hoping for that.
Yeah. I was kind of ashamed that it came up and then it goes away. I think it would be a great moment. Yeah, it's one of those little flirtations. Just like I was disappointed because Last Light kind of flirts with doing a whodunit in Halo, and it doesn't really commit all the way. I would love the Unlikely Allies buddy cop sort of story. Maybe that's a short story coming. But he gets super injured, but Gorian does not kill him, just wanders away. So Horvath lives to fight another day. And then we get another big time skip to show how everyone's doing. Like, everyone's grouped up in the Mortal Reverie. They're like, hey, it's great. Our regular Joes are sort of sparring for training. They're learning how to actually be competent soldiers as opposed to just support staff. Lasky is still MIA. It's clearly something's bad going down, but of course the regular people don't know about it, just the Spartans do. And here's where we get the tie-in to the data logs about how the Spartans are planning to kill Asharam, because the Banished is clearly not doing great, and they think if they break the unity of it by killing him, it'll be okay. And I think it's interesting that how they describe this, like how they know it's a desperate, stupid plan, it really kind of ties into, to me, it reminded me of Operation Red Flag. Has a similar sort of, all right, this is a dumb idea, but it's our only one we've got. And spoiler alert, we already know it doesn't work out well. Everyone gets killed except for Spartan Griffin, who ends up in the tower. And this is, again, one of those things where you kind of assume there would be an action scene here of showing it, but no, instead they just hard cut, and with the other Spartans come back and saying, oh yeah, we messed up, it failed. And the Banished are coming for the Mortal Reverie. There's some character squabbling, because like the Spartans are very much gung-ho, we have to stand and fight, whereas Murphy is like, you've got a bunch of non-coms and support staff, it's going to be terrible. And then we get, again, like a cut from the attack coming at night to it lasting a day and a half and jumping forward. I did think that the scenes of like everyone preparing at night, we get some pathos and Browning and Murphy chat. It really reminded me of all the pre-battle scenes in Helm's Deep. I was really expecting it to just start raining when they approached, but yeah, the battle does not go well. We get some interesting mentions that I never actually don't think we've ever seen this, that they have anti-gravity plates, the UNSC. So they mentioned that they're trying to lift a Spartan away, and they have to end up having another Spartan drag them, because obviously they're super heavy. The Gavin Joe is our first casualty of the normal people. He does his whole go without me, I'll just hold you back because I'm mortally wounded thing. And so the Reverie falls, and they all retreat, and they're getting chased by the Banished. And they have an interesting little bit about, I like we were saying, they don't spend much time with the Spartan 4s as much. We spend a lot of time just talking about how the Spartan 4s get beat the hell up in this one. All sorts of mechanical stuff, which is interesting, because Kovan briefly gets disabled because like their gel layer is faulty and locking up, so they get frozen, and Browning has to like decide to run and distract them. And again, it's like speaking to how you're talking about like relatable stuff versus crazy Spartan things. He manages to steal a ghost, and then within half a page crashes it and gets knocked out. Like there's no amazing run or like heroic stand, or he blows up a bunch of stuff, and it's like, no, he runs into a brute and gets captured. And I didn't quite buy that everyone cares so much about him, because he doesn't spend a lot of time. I guess it's kind of one of those things where he's our medic, we really need him, but everyone gets incredibly distraught by losing him. Coven tries to find him, can't find him, and Browning is we get a nice thing continuing the nail in the coffin for people who want human enemies in the Banished, because there is a human that's sort of processing the the captured people to say, oh, you'll be useful. These wouldn't be useful. But they mentioned, like, because in the previous books, like Shadows of Reach and stuff, they explained that after Cortana had taken over, a lot of the brutes had just kind of massacred their humans and stuff like that. And then in this one, they mentioned, oh yeah, now after the brute homeworld got destroyed, like they're extra like persona non grata. So there's nobody. There's not going to be any humans in the Banished in a game ever.
I like
Don't
that.
get your hopes up.
I like that detail. As far as having an explanation of why we don't see any, to sort of, oppose the welcoming, whoever wants to sign up can sign up, and then, well, that whole homeworld thing, kind of smart. So we're gonna hold that against you.
Yeah, and thankfully they don't bother giving this guy a name because it's one more name. He's only there for a scene to show like really that he's useful. The Banished still have humans and also sort of help demoralize them because they put everyone up in a spot where they can see everybody else get killed. It's like, yeah, they're just terrible. We do get later on I think a reference back to Stomping on the Heels of the Fuss in Halo Evolutions, where they're just kind of like ripping apart humans for sport. Brutes are terrible. Versus they execute everyone just by suffocating them with methane, which is like, all right, that's a novel, terrible way to go. But the Spartans get torn apart, so it's fun times for that.
How much where the story took the time to describe those things, and especially with the Spartans, that their armor was ripped off however they wanted, their bodies ripped apart. I felt like I had kind of this almost like Covenant-like reaction to it. I kept thinking about, the armor is so identified, and that's what you associate, and that's where all the feels are with the Spartans. Their armor. What do they look like? What does their armor look like? Like that's all that matters. So the Spartan and the armor are one, and so to see that, just destroyed and disregarded and ripped apart was very like, I could just hear the like gravel of the elite in my background. This heresy will not stand. Like just this emotional reaction to this desecration reminded me of better times for the.
Yeah, and they definitely spend a lot of time beating up the Spartans. I think more than, I guess they kind of do it a bit in the Flood, but here like they're prying off. They like have to like jerry rig stuff to pry off armor plates because they don't have the necessary facilities and stuff like that, and they're running out of their pain meds and nutrition stuff like that. Spartans are supposed to be able to last indefinitely doing all this stuff, but they're getting so run down. It's a nice detail. Everyone, when they keep meeting up with each other, they keep on remarking on how messed up the other ones look. But yeah, they end up going to the tower, so we meet Chad Locke again briefly, and Browning gets questioned by the mysterious person who doesn't give his name, but it's totally Griffin. I like that. I was looking up Halopedia, just did not even pretend like there's a question about it. They're like, no, it's just, it never got mentioned, but it's Griffin. And so we get another skip ahead. Coven's group is off at a forward operating base. They've met others. They get a little bit information. Again, there's like this little detail about how they've set up leaderboards for all the resistance groups to keep track of their progress. They got fanciful names like Hatriox and the Gravediggers. And yeah, things are not great. They're having to like scavenge boots from dead Marines. We do get some of Glibnub's propaganda, which I really love. The propaganda towers in Infinite, they were one of my favorite things. And it's always fun just to imagine it all in Joe Staten's voice because it's so distinctive about how like can't mate when you're not dead. All that stuff was great. So I liked the little parts that reminded me of those tootling around and hearing that stuff in Infinite. And you have to destroy them for an achievement, but you'd let them run for a while just because they were so hilarious. And then we finally hit like halfway through, we finally hit the title drop with the invoke Rubicon Protocol. So that all right, now there's no organized resistance. You just got to do whatever you can to survive and do damage where you can. They don't definitively answer it, but also this is probably why they mentioned that the Banished are probably trying to use the ring as a new homeworld, especially after their homeworld was destroyed. It makes sense. So it's nice to have kind of soft confirmation about that. And then we cut back to, after it's been a really long time, but they finally cut back to Horvath, who's been doing kind of a Bear Grylls survivalist thing in his own. For most of this book, he's actually off doing his own thing, it's an interesting choice. He's looking for a location from the Phantom, basically where the Banished are digging. He finds an excavation site and a woman tortured and left to die. And again, it's a nice little touch to the other stuff that she was part of the Zeta Halo team that was always there, not from the Infinity. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that they had a bunch of people on this ring. And just like tells her his real name, and he leaves her with a bullet to put in her head and put her out of his misery because she's beat up. But of course she wants them to, Horvath, to stop them because they've found some data, whatever, kind of foreign or MacGuffin stuff. I appreciate that they spend, this is one of those times where it's like, all right, you give me the name or whatever, but it's just you have your little character moment. I don't have to keep track of this person again. I can move on. That works well for me when you have so many characters. And then we skip ahead. They end up meeting, Coven and Stone end up meeting. They've been communicating through a forward operating base. They notice everyone's moving back towards the Reverie. They think Asharim's coming, so they decide he must die because this time will definitely be different than last time. And now they mention that Outpost Tremonius is they've renamed the Reverie Outpost Tremonius. Browning is still around, and we get the scene that's briefly mentioned where they take him down to the Silex, and out pops the Harbinger, who takes a shine to the lad, and nothing good can happen. I do actually, in this final section, I do like a lot, because one of my complaints with something like Hunters in the Dark was that we went back to a place we'd been, the Ark, and then there was basically nothing recognizable about most of the locations we went. Whereas this one, they spent a lot of time at Tremonius and bopping around underneath it, so you have a better sense of geography and where things are. And I like that they don't feel like they're operating in two separate spheres that don't touch.
I liked that as well. It was also fun. I think every group went past that Silex, like that exact same spot at some point. I thought, you know what I mean? It's like we got, oh, there it is, and it gave this, everyone had, the hairs on their neck were standing up, and then, we have some other time, and then another group went through. So yeah, I thought it was, I like that shared space as well, and I was like, oh, I guess, I mean, this is the place to be. So everyone was going past it.
Yeah, Foundation. And so the lifeboat group with the Spartans make it to the Reverie, and they see Browning and learn the Banished are moving on to the Conservatory, so they're moving on to the campaign as well. Coven and Stone talk, like Coven wants to grab Browning at night, and so Browning ends up going back to the tower. They leave him with stuff to, like, all right, if you can keep track, listening devices and stuff, like they won't check you, try and find out more about this Harbinger. That's when Stone enters the excavation, so they're retracing the steps, and they encounter skimmers shadowing them, and then they run into the Banished, led by Jaga and Gorian again. They find some defense information that Coven wants to deny them, so they manage to get the info, delete it off the crystal or whatever, but gets killed by Jaga, leaving them where you found them. And they name drop the upgraded shield module that you loot off their corpse as Master Chief 6 months later, or 3 months later, or whatever it is. And so the final section is sort of spending time with Browning, who gets interrogated by the Harbinger. And again, like you're saying, all right, they don't really explain things better than they do in Infinite, but they at least tease certain things, like the fact that I mean, there's the question of like how the Harbinger and the Endless are connected to, well, whatever else, how they managed to survive the Halo firing. The Harbinger specifically has a great mind quote about "I shall talk and you shall listen," and so much of what Browning describes about like being interrogated by and like having their mind messed with really feels like Logic Plague and Gravemind stuff, which I think is intentional. But again, they don't actually say one way or another what's going on. So we're still left to specify and
I was
speculate.
actually thinking about whenever he was talking about how she's inside my mind and burrowed deep, and he just wanted to end it all. It made me think when they were speaking to I maybe thrown out the wrong name. Is it the timeless one, the precursor,
on
where he I mean he just those words and power of, I guess, the knowledge that it has, and then just speaking that, and everyone just is wiped out because they can't handle it, and they just would rather
they commit suicide and stuff on in Cryptum, I guess is where that gets mentioned. Yeah, eventually the normies call out Coven on hiding a secret, and Coven reveals that Browning's alive, and everyone's angry. And they want to go find him. They head into the outpost too. They find Stone's body, but they can't move it because A, that would be too heavy, and B, Master Chief needs to find them, and it's going to be a whole plot point. And they come across a sub-monitor who, 091 Adjutant Veridity, who is the sub-monitor who showed up in Point of Light. So that's the connection there. Just one of the sub-monitors. And they have to free Despondent Pyre because they learn that the Banished have stolen data from the hub that are part of the Conspectus network, which is the entire historical record of Installation 07. And they realize they can use the data that Stone recovered to find out where they are and notify the UNSC. So that's finally at the end of this book. This part of the book, they have their plan. And this is kind of like the Rogue One vibes, is they just need to get a signal out and need to stop the Banished from breaking into the conservatory. And the Conspectus network or hub is also where Horvath is headed because he's using the map the Oni operative left him. There's a couple mentions, like here he mentions that he has to run across like this tar lake. Later there's mentions of like snowy peaks and stuff, and like these like sort of wastelands, and it does make me a little sad when I remember that we only had one real biome in Halo Infinite. Like, ooh, all these other interesting places that are not pine forest.
Yeah,
oh well.
That's again, it's a sad reminder of the failures of the damn game. You know what I mean? It's like it's easy to surmise that a lot of stuff was planned to be in that game, like maybe more than one environment. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, because we had in the engine thing, we had like that desert and stuff too.
Yep.
And, the little ocean. But Horvath finally ends up meeting up with Coven's group, and I think it's a nice through line, kind of, because they mentioned at the beginning everyone's barbers and random people, they're non-combatants, and they're training. And now after like 140 days, when Horvath meets them, he thinks they're all like, they're all seasoned veterans. Like he mistakes one of them and like, he's probably an ODST, to show how they've grown. And so they head to the conservatory, and the plan is to free Despondent Pyre, kill Gorian and Jaga, and send a message out to the UNSC. And they will accomplish some of those things. So they awaken Despondent Pyre, and she's kind of grumpy and groggy, like really inspired. I felt nothing has been more relatable than how she just does not want to get up, basically. I can appreciate that. But she rouses when she learns the Harbinger has been freed. and tells them they need to reactivate one of the communication beacons, aka the little classic Halo towers that shoot the little beams into the sky. Verity stays with Pyre. They teleport out the observatory and they assault one of the towers, and then they have to hold for the message to send. And at this point, Murphy dies because he pulls a "Get down, Mr. President" and protects the console from destruction, so the message gets out, which it does. And then Horvath faces down against Gorian to Cam. So pretty much most of the other humans get killed, or regular guys get killed. Horvath kills Gorian, but accidentally gets teleported away. And then so Verity ends up saving the rest of Coben's group, and they decide to head for the tower because that's where they assume Browning is. He's not, though. He's actually taken to the House of Reckoning. And we get some more villain monologue stuff with Harbinger, which does not really clarify anything. It's more just kind of generic villain stuff. So motivations and all that are still up in the air, and you actually get more of that from the game if you're paying attention than here, which is kind of a shame. And then, that's where you sort of end up with the sort of abrupt ending, because they're going to go over to the tower and we never hear from them again. And Horvath ends up on some snowy peak again. It was like, oh man, if only there had been snow in Halo Infinite. And he records his final log that Chief ends up finding, that he's headed to parts unknown, and that he's basically the last, I think, of the Spartan audio logs we get. He's the only one who's theoretically still alive during Infinite, because he's headed up the ring to try and find Lasky and everyone else, and to be continued. And then it ends. I was like, wait, what? So a little bit of a damp squib of an ending, because I wanted to know more, even if it was just everyone, and then they all died.
I'm sure there'll be another
appreciated some
book that
closure.
carries on exactly where we left off in a few months or a year or two's time. Don't worry.
Take it another 5 yards down the field, or whatever the UK soccer
We have
football
yards
equivalent
over
of that
here.
metaphor
Thank you
is.
very fucking much. Okay, we have yards.
Okay, sorry. Hard to know. But you don't have first downs, so my metaphor still
Yeah, I have
doesn't
no
make any
idea what you're on
sense.
about, but that's typical of Americans anyway.
In American football, you have to advance 10 yards to get a first down and then keep possession. And
First,
sometimes they
okay.
just only get...
What?
Yeah, I should not be trying to explain American football because I barely understand it either. Ignore that. Either way, yes, at some point we will probably get a follow-up that will answer half the questions we want.
Yep.
We do, at this point, we already do know. So this is Kelly Gay's 4th book, the 5th one, the upcoming Halo novel. The next one, as far as we know, is also written by Kelly Gay. It is, possibly it will tie in, but it got announced in late October, and it's going to continue the story of the Erdidact, and is set after Halo Escalation. So after all the people who complained that they knocked out this new villain they just invented, and then they brought him back in the comics just to get rid of him again, he's back. And maybe that will tie in to Installation 07 stuff, but at this point we have no idea. So who knows? I do hope that we do see like Horvath and stuff. I do think Kelly did a good job of making them characters I wanted to see, and I would love to have future campaign DLC, whatever, cross your fingers, where Master Chief actually meets up with Spartans and they're not all just dead.
Well, you didn't
that would
like
be my
just
hope.
encountering dead Spartans all the time in the campaign? Like, I thought that was a tour de force of characterization. Another dead one. Another dead one. Another dead one.
I mean, you had to introduce grapple shots and other stuff somehow. Threat sensors, just looting your. And I did laugh that they have a line about that in the book too, about like I forget who, Stone or whoever, like tries to go back specifically to loot some corpses because that's the only real way they have to repair themselves in the field. So Master Chief was just following their lead. Oh. Any
I
other
had
thoughts before we wrap up?
I said one more. I really liked that we went through this story with different Spartan fours, with different people, medics, barbers, everybody, and the what happened in the tragedy, and like through all their hardship is that this sounds like an inspirational poster, but they came together as a team and they realized that they had to stop the banish. That sounds incredibly simplistic, and it's like, well, yeah, of course they are. But where I thought it was going to go was, we were going to have, we could have mistrust in the team. We could have a traitor within the team. We could have, you're a Spartan. Why didn't you save me in the team? And then, they're feeling this whole way. And then, oh no, the band's going to break up. And I'm saying that, I mean, that can be done well, of course. I just, in my opinion, have seen it done not very well too many times. So I was glad that everybody did what you think a normal person would do, is that we're facing insurmountable odds. We need to stick together. And then that's what they did, because it was life or death every moment. So I really like that for where it didn't go, I would say.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of they mentioned, this has come up with criticism of some of the new Star Trek or whatever versus the old one, is like sometimes, like, because people were like, oh, there's got to be interpersonal conflict, and sometimes you just like call it competence porn. It's like, all right, people have their issues and like they're working through it, but also they're just getting the job done, and sometimes that's a more enjoyable story. So yeah, I definitely agree that it could have gone in more melodramatic ways, and I'm glad they didn't. Like the closest we got was I forget who, the barber, I think, who's crushing on one of the Spartans. I forget who, Stone maybe, or maybe it was Kovan. But that's about as much as you get. It's sort of a straight line, and then it's not a big deal. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Day and Nightly.
Thank you both for
talking about this,
for having me. It was awesome, and it was great to just again be critically looking and thinking through. Yeah, Halo. It's great. Thank you.
So that wraps up for this show today. Show notes and links for this episode, as well as articles and more, can be found on our website, FUDcast.com. You can subscribe to the podcast via iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher. Google Play is no longer a thing. I just found that out. Check out our videos on YouTube at youtube.com/forwarduntodawn, or follow us on Twitter for the moment, if that's still a thing, and however long, for updates to all our content at the handle @ForwardDawn. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.